There was peace and quiet in that Kirkland, Washington neighborhood. Families did well there, and kids played without fear. But on the night of July 17th, 2006, something terrible took place. At 11:32 a.m., the 911 call came in. A family from Ukraine had a house on fire. When the firemen got there, they had no idea that there was an unbelievably horrible thing hidden beneath the falling building. That's what many people would call the American dream for the Milken family. They lived in a quiet area near Forbes Lake in Kirkland, Washington, until a terrible event took them out in an instant. Their home was full of love, laughter, and the warmth of a well-built life. Leonid Leo Milken, a committed sergeant in the Washington National Guard, was the heart of the family. They left Ukraine with the hope of starting a new life in the United States in 1989, which was the start of his journey. Leo served in Iraq from 2004 to 2006, where he faced the harsh facts of war with unwavering strength. But his heart was always with his family, and he couldn't help but count down the 6 weeks until he could finally see them again. His dear wife Olga loved and cared for him a lot. Olga, who was born on July 22, 1977, was a loving wife, mother, and a qualified worker in her own right. As well as working as a dental assistant in Bellevue, she also had to take care of her 2 young kids. Neighbors said Olga was friendly and open, and she had a natural way of making people feel welcome and important. They had 2 boys who they loved very much. Justin, 5 years old, and Andrew, 3 years old, were the lifeblood of the Milken family. Because they liked to play, they often went to the shores of Forbes Lake to swim during the summer. Justin was especially proud of the fact that his dad was in the military and would often tell other people he's in the military service. The kids' parents loved them very much, and their aunt, Olga's sister, would also spoil them rotten. Lyubov, Olga's younger sister, was a shining example of hard work and kindness at age 24. She was a student at Seattle Pacific University and was working toward a bachelor's degree in languages. Lyubov was a beloved friend to many because she was kind and honestly believed that people were good. Because she loved her brothers Andrew and Justin, she often went to see the Milken family. It was hard for the Milken family to get from Ukraine to the United States. The family was able to start over, though, because they were strong and loved life. When they moved to Mill Creek, Washington, they became important parts of the Russian-Ukrainian society there. Their home was a safe place for love, hopes, and a mix of cultures. It was a place where their past and future lived together in peace. They had a wonderful life together until July 17, 2006, when an unimaginable act destroyed it all. When firemen finally put out the fire and went into the ruins of a family's hopes and dreams, they found the bodies. The fire hadn't killed them, though. Their killers would stay unknown for a minute after their bodies were found, each one bearing a terrible tale. Each victim had been stabbed many times in a brutal way. Their cuts were horrible and cruel. Cuts had been made in the kids' throats. The person who did this meant for them to suffer. The cops quickly found the person they thought was responsible. The whole neighborhood would be shocked by what they found. Dear Connor M. Shearman, a friend who is 24 years old, someone who moved in 2 weeks ago across the street from the Milken house. People who were nearby saw him sneaking around the property with a red gas can before the fire started. But what scared me the most were the deep scratches on his face, which looked like he had been fighting, as if someone had tried to stay alive that night while he was being horrible. On July 19th, 2 days after the murder, Connor was caught. He told them he started the fire when they asked him to. But the killings? He said he couldn't remember them. Connor said he had passed out because he had drunk so much that night. 3 bottles of vodka. He only remembered waking up in the Milken house where there were dead people all around him. You might be wondering who Connor M. Shearman was. For the horrible acts he did in July 2006, Connor M. Shearman, who was born in Bellevue, Washington, was 24 years old. Someone who seemed like a nice neighbor would turn out to be a terrible thief. The monster inside, on the other hand, kept track of the family next door and planned to wipe them off the face of the earth. In the CCTV tape that police later found, Connor was even seen buying things to start a fire. If it happened, was it a hate crime or just the voice of evil inside him? For years to come, the country would wonder. But before he killed these people, Connor didn't have a serious crime record. The community was shocked by his sudden and violent actions on July 17, 2006. He was later arrested and found guilty of killing Olga Milken, her 2 young kids, Justin and Andrew, and her sister, Lyubov Botvina. Connor's account of what happened was almost too easy to believe. He said that he did take a shower at the Milken house. He admitted putting on hospital clothes that he found inside. He revealed that he bought gasoline, set the house on fire, and then tried to hide his tracks. But he would never say that he killed the people. He asked them to believe him instead. But there was a lot of proof against him. Investigators carefully gathered evidence that would later be very important in the trial of Connor M. Shearman as they looked into what happened after the Milken family tragedy. Even though the crime scene was badly damaged by fire, it turned up some very important information. The first one is the game knife. A hunting knife was found at the bottom of the stairs in the burned-out remains of the Milan home. This blood-stained weapon was found to be the one that was used to brutally stab Olga, Justin, Andrew, and Lyubov. Second, clothes that are stained with blood. The bodies of Olga and Lyubo were found in the master bedroom, where police also found clothes that were deeply stained with blood. These clothes had DNA proof that connected Connor to the crime scene. Third, the flashlight. The flashlight that was found in the same bedroom was a sign of planning ahead. Its appearance showed that Connor had prepared to find his way around the dark house, which added to the story of his role in the planned break-in. 4. The glove that was partly burned. A glove that had been partly burned by the fire was found close to the victims. This item not only put Connor at the scene of the crime, but it also showed that he tried to hide his fingerprints while he was killing people and eating a whole family. The fifth thing is surveillance video. Security cameras caught Connor buying gas at a nearby station not long before the fire was reported. This video proved the timeline and his plan to destroy proof by setting the house on fire. Sixth, damage to the body. While Connor was being arrested, new cuts and scratches were seen on his face and neck. These wounds looked like defense wounds that the victims got during the fight, which connects him even more to the horrible act. The result was both scary and easy to understand. It wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a mistake made while drunk. This was a murder, a crime that was performed in cold blood and was planned ahead of time. After 3 years, Connor's trial started in court. Just choosing the jurors took weeks. People were willing to die for their crimes. Prosecutors said Connor planned the attack, went into the house with a gun to kill, and killed a whole family in cold blood. They also said Connor tried to cover up his crime by setting it on fire. Connor's defense team used the only card they had, which was a blackout caused by drinking. Drug experts, psychologists, and toxicologists were called in to say that Connor was too drunk to have intended to kill anyone and couldn't remember because his mind had blacked out. The jury didn't believe it, whether it was because they really cared about Connor or just wanted to keep him from getting a harsh penalty. As the punishment phase began, Connor went to the stand. He begged the judges for mercy for 25 minutes with tears in his eyes. He told the families of the victims he was sorry. He said he burned down the house, but he never said he killed the people. Connor looked very different from the man who had been caught years before. He was dressed in standard prison clothes. His mood was tense, and his face was marked with regret and worry. His voice wavered as he spoke, and he kept dabbing his eyes with a tissue while trying to stay calm. His sunk stance showed that he felt bad about what he had done. "I know you don't want to hear this," he started. "I know you don't want my tears." His voice was barely above a whisper. "You want your family back. I am unable to return them to you." It was like every word he said made him feel heavy, like he was trying to figure out how big his actions were, or just how good an actress he was. He took a break. There was a long pause in the courtroom as everyone waited for him to speak again. "I may not be allowed to ask for anything," he said next, "but please forgive me. If not for myself, then for my family." The plea wasn't just for his own life. It was also for his mother and sister, who were in the courtroom. Their faces showed both pain and hope at the same time. What about the good family, though? Everyone else was curious. As he spoke, Connor didn't go into specifics about the crimes because his lawyer told him not to, and because that's how the allocution process works. It lets suspects in death penalty cases talk without being questioned by the other side. Instead, he talked about how sorry he was and how his possible death would affect his family. What he said wasn't enough. The families of the victims sat quietly while he spoke. Their faces showed a range of emotions, including pain, anger, and maybe a desire for peace. Olga's husband, Leonid Milkin, who was serving in Iraq at the time of the killings, listened carefully, but it was hard to read his face. He had been through unimaginable loss, and now he was facing the raw humanity of the guy who was responsible but begged for his mercy. James Conroy, Connor's defense lawyer, had previously told a story about a troubled person who was struggling with alcoholism, suggesting that Connor had been drunk when the killings happened. The jurors, however, did not believe this defense, which is why they found the defendants guilty. At this very last moment, Conroy hoped that Connor's admission of guilt would move the jury toward leniency. King County Deputy Prosecutor Scott O'Toole led the case, which gave a very different picture. They said Connor was a planned killer who broke into a family's home and did horrible things. All the signs pointed to the horrible crime he planned to do. O'Toole talked about the terrible loss the Milkin family had, focusing on how innocent the young boys were whose lives were brutally cut short by this horrible man. When Connor was done speaking, he looked straight at the jury with pleading eyes. "Someone told me I was going to die." His voice broke as he said, "I'm going to hell. I'm already there." After saying these last words, he went back to his seat, leaving the jury to think about how serious his plea was and how important their choice was going to be. As the jury thought about what they had heard, the courtroom was quiet. The choice they had to make was huge. It had to balance the scales of justice, the needs of society, and the last bits of kindness that Connor had tried to stir up. Not only Connor's life, but also the lives of those who would be forever changed by what he did, were in danger. Over the next few days, the jury would deliberate, with each member weighing their morals, the law, and the emotional evidence given during the trial. The execution gave their job a highly personal touch. by giving a man convicted of horrible crimes a human side. But their decision would affect more than just Connor's life. It would also affect the families of the victims, the Ukrainian community, and the larger conversation about justice and forgiveness. The jury was under a lot of pressure to come up with a fair decision for everyone. The trial against Connor M. Shearman was very public because it happened after the brutal murders of Olga Milkin, her two kids Justin and Andrew, and her sister Lyubov Botvina. He was found guilty of 4 counts of severe first-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree arson on April 12, 2010. There was only one thing left to think about. Would he live or die? There was a lot of emotion during the 2-week penalty part of the trial. After thinking about it for a day and a half, the judges unanimously decided that the person should be put to death. On May 5, 2010, Judge Greg Canova of King County Superior Court gave Connor his official death sentence by lethal injection. Reports say that Connor shook his head as the decision was read. Leonid Milkin, who was married to, fathered, and brother-in-law of the victims and still lives, felt relieved and said that he thought justice was being done. Right away, Connor's defense team said they were going to appeal the decision to the Washington State Supreme Court. This caused a lot of people to worry about how the jury was chosen and what the prosecution said during the trial. Connor's family was at the punishment, but did not want to say anything in public. At the news conference for the family in the King County Prosecutor's Office, Dan Satter, the prosecutor for King County, talked to reporters. He said, "The death penalty is the law of this state, and it is only used for the worst crimes." Satter was not in office when the prosecutors charged Connor with murder and asked for the death penalty. This prosecution team put together that case for the jury, and we think they made the right decision. They are great people who came to the US to live the dream, but that dream was crushed. In addition, Satter said that what Connor did was the worst crimes in the history of this county. The day of the sentence wasn't about Connor, he said. It was to remember the people whose lives he took. The Washington State Supreme Court said in 2018 that the state's death sentence was unconstitutional because it was applied unfairly and based on race. Because of this, Connor's death sentence was changed to life in jail without the chance of parole. There were 4 counts of severe first-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree arson. The jury came back with their decision on April 12, 2010, after 9 hours of deliberation. Connor was found guilty on 4 separate counts, and each count related to a different victim. Olga Milkin, who is 28 years old, is married to Leonid Milkin and has 2 children, Justin and Andrew. Oleg and Leonid Milkin have a 5-year-old son named Justin. Andy Milkin is Olga and Leonid's 3rd child and their youngest son. Lyubov Botvina is Olga's younger sister and is 24 years old. The prosecution used a number of aggravated reasons to bring the charges against multiple victims, the killing of 4 people at the same time. Risky situation. The fact that Justin and Andrew were so young made the victims' helplessness stand out. Trying to hide a crime, the arson was seen as a planned attempt to get rid of proof and hide the murders. Connor was found guilty of setting the Milkin house on fire on purpose after the killings, which also means that the murders were planned ahead of time. The prosecution said the fire was done on purpose to get rid of evidence and make the probe harder. The jury thought about their choice for about 9 hours before coming to a unanimous decision. As we've already talked about, the jury first gave Connor the death penalty by fatal injection. But why did the judge change his sentence to life in prison? After the guilty verdicts, the trial moved on to the sentencing part, where it was decided whether Connor would get the death penalty or be locked up for life without the chance to get out. On May 5, 2010, the judges said that Connor should be put to death. This choice was made because the crimes were so horrible, and there were many things that made them worse. After that, the judge in charge confirmed what the panel had said and officially sentenced Connor to death. But later changes in the law caused a change that would change the course of Connor's life. In 2018, the Washington State Supreme Court said that the death sentence was unconstitutional because it could be used unfairly and against people of color. All death sentences in the state were changed to life sentences without the chance of release after this important decision. Because of this decision, Connor's death sentence was changed to life in jail without the chance of parole. People in the quiet Washington suburb of Kirkland saw an unimaginable horror happen that would change one man's life forever. In July 2006, Sergeant Leonid Milken, who was in Iraq with the Washington National Guard, got terrible news. His whole family had been brutally killed, and their house had been set on fire to hide the horrible crime. The people who died were his beloved wife Olga, their two young kids Justin and Andrew, and Lyubov Botvina, Olga's sister. He felt sad and asked himself, "Why did this happen to me?" As he went from one war to another at home. Leonid was in Iraq and wanted to make his family proud of his job as a sergeant. Little did he know that a man who had just walked into their neighborhood 2 weeks before was killing his family in cold blood. When Milken heard the terrible news, he was given emergency leave to go back home. He got home while still wearing his military fatigues to find that his house had been destroyed by fire, a haunting sign of the violence that had happened. The community mourned with him, trying to understand the horrible crime that had broken up this family. Why did he have to go through this unbearable loss? Everyone in the neighborhood wanted things to end. After the attack, Milken had to deal with a destroyed home and a family that no longer existed. He also had to rebuild his life, which was hard in many ways, and his mental damage made him long for peace. Once a place of joy and love, his house was now a sad reminder of what he had lost. The always strong sergeant, however, chose to rebuild the life that had been destroyed by a man he barely knew and who had no right to ruin his life in that way. He was determined to get it back, but he ran into many problems, including disagreements with contractors over the damage to the foundation of his beloved home, which caused legal fights and slowed down the rebuilding process. Even with these problems, the people of Kirkland came together to support Milken. Leonid needed his community the most at this point, and he found that they were there for him, ready to fight for his rights and help him rebuild his home. A family that came to the US to start over could no longer be found. Sergeant Leonid was left to rebuild his life from the charred remains of his own loved family. In 2010, 4 years after his family was killed, Milken was getting ready to move back into his rebuilt home. He saw it as a memorial to his family and a base for his future. He now lives there with memories of his 2 boys and his beloved wife. He still doesn't understand why his life was taken away when all he wanted was to be with his family and be at peace. The Milken family killing is still one of the scariest crimes in Washington state history. It was a tragedy that broke up a family and a crime that was so cruel and made no sense that it shook the whole community. And that's the end of this case. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. If you want to see more true crime stories, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, stay safe and keep questioning everything.